Don't Mess with an Engineer, by User Ockelman. I worked for a company that provides specialized equipment used in manufacturing. To protect my anonymity, I'll have to be vague about what exactly this machine does. During my time working in this field, I got to know many clients who would need these machines installed and serviced. One of these customers we'll call Jake. I later left the company for a different job, but Jake apparently kept my number. One afternoon I got a call from Jake that they wanted a new unit installing and another unit needed maintenance and wanted to know if I was available. I let him know that I left the company but that I could pass him on to someone who could help. He tells me he'll pay 2x my current rate to install the unit over the weekend. He lets me know that the company has increased the rates for installation and the company just can't afford it. The instructions they sent over just aren't clear enough and their engineers are scratching their heads trying to figure it out. He begs me to consider it and I agree. For more context, installing this unit can take a good few hours, or up to a day on your own. The company gives you two options. You can either pay for an engineer to come and install it, or you can save money and they will send instructions so the customer's own engineers can install it. The instructions aren't easy to follow and it's company policy that if someone has started to install the equipment, the supplier wouldn't get involved since they couldn't verify that any of the pieces were broken. This will be important later. I drive down on the weekend and they show me the boxes of equipment. I set to work and I make good progress installing the unit. Around 6 hours in and I'm stopped by Jake who greets me. I let him know I'm nearly finished and he tells me sorry but they just don't have the budget to pay you. He understands my frustration but his engineers can take it from here. To say I was frustrated was an understatement. I wanted revenge. There's a small button inside the unit that changes the unit into test mode. This is done to perform maintain on the unit but it's impossible to configure the unit with this button pressed. It's only possible to reach this button using a pin so it's not easily pressed during installation. Because of this, the installation instructions don't mention it. There's no real way of telling the equipment is in test mode, it just won't work normally. I think you can guess where this is going. I click the button, collect my things and leave. Monday morning I get a call from Jake. I declined. I knew my old company wouldn't get involved since I already started installing the unit. I knew his engineers would never figure it out. I just had to let him stew. A few days later with many missed calls, I finally pick up. Jake is furious. He asks me where the hell I've been and why I haven't been picking up the phone. He tells me they can't figure it out how to configure the machine and they need my help. I tell him, why is this my problem? You won't pay me. He told me he was sorry and they would work something out if I could get there as soon as possible. I told him, oh no, you're going to pay me £7,000 up front before I do anything. I'd never felt this powerful before. He screamed at me for a bit and hung up. He called back a day later after saying he's sorry for how he acted and said that if I could come fix it he would pay me, in a totally defeated tone. He tried to fight it saying he'll pay when I was done but I was having none of it. After a bit of back and forth, he agrees to pay me. The money hit my account and I came in the next day. The look of confusion over his face when I took out a pin and changed the unit from test mode was priceless. It was even more priceless seeing his reaction to me packing up my tools and leaving after only 20 minutes of configuring. Easiest £7,000 I'd ever made. Don't try to mess with a professional problem solver. Mock the disabled? Justice is served many years later, by user SC2 Superjack. This is a story about a piece of shit receiving their deserved karma several years later. Many years ago, I worked in the lovely career of retail. It's sadly normal for there to be a constant flow of shop scum that make you despise their existence and there are those that are so horrific that what they do is burned into your mind forever. Fortunately, one of these unforgettable moments allowed me to extract my revenge. I had only worked in retail for 1 year in this newly built store and was starting to settle in. Getting to know the great customers and understanding that some people shouldn't be allowed outside, which being a shy person who hates conflict wasn't the best, but at least one of my customers was an absolutely adorable elderly lady who always made time to talk and was an absolute joy to be with. It had been some weeks since I had last seen her, but one morning, I see her car park into the disabled parking bay, as she already has a blue badge, only this time she hobbled out of the car on crutches with a pot on her leg. I didn't have chance to talk to her yet when a works truck, which did not have a blue disabled badge, pulled into the disabled space next to her and out jumped an early 40s builder with their teenage kid. Well, this little old lady was having none of this and must have absolutely massive balls of steel and stood up to this ignorant builder and politely informed them that they shouldn't be parking there as it's for the disabled and he doesn't have a badge. What happened next, I can't forget. this builder decided the best course of action was to humiliate and insult this poor elderly lady in crutches, accuse her of faking her disability and claim the cast on her leg was a fake and that she probably milks the benefit system for as much money as possible, then walks off putting on an overdramatic fake limp laughing away with their teenage kid whilst the old lady stood there in shock. Sadly, being one who lacks courage, I did absolutely nothing about it, and that would stick with me forever. I tried feebly to ask a manager later to do something about it, but they didn't care or want to get involved. For years, I worked in this store always seeing this scum builder come in and out. Fortunately, I never interacted with this scum builder, but I saw them often, and every time I did, I would always remember what they had done vividly. I would still see them park in the disabled bays, and even got to the point where I would recognize them by the large blue Mercedes they drove. 7 years later I was still working in this store, and this scum was still parking in disabled and looking like an absolute cunt. Yet this year I was blessed with good fortune and our store was outfitted with some absolute joyful equipment. Due to the high number of complaints, our store had set up a company to deal with the parking violations, but instead of having external parties coming in and ticketing cars, the staff of the store were given the ticketing machine, and it was our duty to go to the car park and record any cars that violated the parking rules. This was all done digitally and there would be no paper tickets upon the cars. This was brilliant. As soon as I found out, I knew what I was going to do. It didn't take long for me to learn how to use the machine, and it certainly didn't take long for the opportunity to get revenge, and so it began. There were 3 rules for parking, and if you break these rules there is a lovely £80 fine in return each time it happened. The first rule: no parking in disabled without a badge. And I know well that the scum builder is certainly violating this rule, and it wasn't long until I saw him next, and as soon as he entered the store, I quickly scurried out with the ticketing machine, and lo and behold, there was the oversized blue Mercedes in the closest disabled bay, with no badge. I smashed them car details in with some well-shot photos and sent the report off so that they would receive a lovely letter of their fine they would ask to pay. That's not enough though, but fortunately it takes weeks for them to finally receive the ticket, which grants me the opportunity to constantly ticket their parking violations. Because as you would expect, the scum would always park in disabled, and as I worked at the front of the store I would always know when they had parked. After ticketing their car dozens of times, the scum unfortunately learnt their lesson, as their oversized blue Mercedes no longer appeared in disabled parking bays. But as you expect, the scum would still be scum, and they would find their new parking space inside child parking. Rule 2: don't park inside child parking without a child. Had this scum gotten enough, I thought? Of course, not. They haven't learnt their lesson and continue to be a complete wanker and park in the child parking, which we didn't have many spaces for. At this point, I knew all their car details by heart and would gleefully fill out the ticket machine as I skipped over to their car violating the child parking and take the photos needed for them, including shots of their cat seats that bear no child seats in them. And as it became routine, this once again carried on a few weeks more of tickets being created, and eventually they start receiving the fines. Fortunately, me being me, I am completely invisible to others and often looked over, and I have yet to be seen or caught. But as all good things must eventually come to an end, when the scum came into the shop, their blue turd automobile was no longer there in child parking, or disabled. Has the scum finally learnt their lesson? Would you be surprised if they had not? As it didn't take me long to find them. Rule 3: you must park inside a marked bay. And what a surprise, the scum still manages to fuck this up. They would park over the line, taking 2 spaces up. Well, guess what? That's a job for me and my ticket machine. Trying to park inside taxi parking but can't fit the big ass car in it. Boom, that ain't inside a marked bay and catching another ticket and fine for they have one single wheel slightly over the white line of a bay. Well, guess who technically broke the rule? That's right, scumbag did. And there goes a few more weeks of fun, until eventually scumbag runs out of ways that they can possibly break the rules and our company hires externally to start ticketing cars, so my beloved weapon of justice goes to rest. Now I know what people are probably going to say, that all these fines are not enforceable because of blah blah blah, but I honestly don't care for a few reasons. Firstly, I'm being paid to do this, so either way my time or money isn't wasted. Secondly, it did have an effect as they repeatable changed their parking habits. And thirdly, even if they don't end up paying, they are still going to spend a fuck ton of the time and effort trying to overturn them over and over again, having to constantly be harassed by mail. Overall, if all the fines are counted separate and added up, they would have received thousands of pounds worth of fines building up over time for being scum. Cherry on the top, about 3 years later I walk by this piece of scum on the car park and watch as they scream at some innocent dude in a high-vis jacket, accusing them for being the one giving them all parking fines. Which put me at peace knowing this must have seriously got to them and cost them to still be raving mad after 3 years. Short version, I give someone many small parking fines adding up to the thousands of pounds for insulting a disabled lady several years earlier. No drinks, no tip, by user high 3R0 Fant. So I'm working at a huge party/concert/miscellaneous event locations and I'm the guy responsible for refilling the bars with drinks every time the bartender mails an order and also picking up the used glasses and pints to bring them to the washing station we have. In general I'm the guy that helps the bars running there. Sometimes there are 2 or 3 of us in a shift but other times not. There can be nights that there 5 billion Argentine pesos open and the place is full with around 3,000 people. Just to give you a taste of what the job looks like when the place is packed on a typical Friday/Saturday night, imagine that you have to carry and deliver around 20 beer kegs, each with a weight of 65 kgs, 130 lbs, and around 60 cases of beer and soft drinks just when you start your shift. When something goes out at the bar, the bartender makes a new order that I have to deliver. And this goes on all night long, from 17:00 till 6 o'clock, and sometimes if there are any Goa parties till 11 o'clock. Also, just to give another taste of big this place is, during a normal shift according to my phone, I'm walking 28 km, 17 miles. Where I come from we call this job runner. The unwritten law there is like this, that each bartender has to give 20% of the tip they make each night to the runner. Because without a runner he would have no drinks to serve. Nobody can really know who is really giving the 20% of their tip, but that's another story. But every bartender is giving something and usually it's a lot and all sides are happy. There comes a new guy and staff manager explains him the unwritten rule, saying exactly these words: you don't want to have problems with any of the runners. So be fair. When you're doing this job for a while you know approximate if the tip you will get is going to be good or not. Fast forward. Huge metal fest with all bars open, 3 different stages and outdoor bars etc., plus after show parties. The place is packed like there is no tomorrow. This festival is happening every year and it's one of the best shifts. Even though a lot of work and around 17 hours of work, yes it's a lot, but walking home with 1,000 tip is worth it. So the new guy has a spot at very good selling bar, was providing and delivering drinks there like crazy. After a long shift when everything done and they do their calculations, he brings the money to the treasury, looks at me, says cold-blooded thank you, have a good night, tonight was a good night to work, and walks away without giving me my tip. That was it folks. I kept doing my job every time he had a shift at one of the bars like nothing happened, and I was just waiting for full packed night to come. And finally after a week it was the time. Again the place is fully packed, his first order arrives in my tablet. Sadly I was too busy to deliver, 1 hour passes, he tries to call me on my phone, I pick standing mixed to a subwoofer. 1.5 hours go by, a second order arrives from him, didn't even deliver the first one. Sadly I was again too busy. Then after half hour the shift manager calls me on the radio. The shift manager was Lasso doing this job before getting a better position there. Hey, what the fuck is going on? Why he has no drinks to sell? I'm busy with the rest of the bars, the guests can go to the other bars. And then I reply he can sell water, but no one tips a bartender for a water, right? Small pause on the radio, you can't be fucking serious, he's living no tip for you guys. Yep, you guessed right. I'm sending this idiot home. Positive. New ownership takes over and guy goes on vacation for 2 years due to stupid new rules, by user weird_stories_here. A family friend was working at the same company since he was 26, up to when he was 64, when the below started. I did get his approval to retell the story, just not include anything specific, so I am keeping it anonymous and quite general on the specific details. Part of the problem was the laws in the country increasing the retirement age from 62 to 65 when he was in his early mid-50s, and then again from 65 to 67 when he was about 62 to 63. The old owners were a family and run the bussiness with benefits to the employees. From everything I have heard, I think they were giving an extra vacation week after every 6 years at the company, so on top of the standard 4 weeks he had an extra 6 weeks. Also people had access to 2 weeks of home office when the job allowed them, or an extra week of for those that couldn't use it. So he was getting 11 weeks off each year. As a bonus, the family owners were allowing people above 55 to use their vacation time as they desired, all at once, with about a 2 weeks notice, which was just a friendly notice according to the guy, or segment it or even not use it and pile it up for the retirement time. Another issue we have at our country is that when you submit retirement paperwork to the government they take effing ages. So it is often the case that they may take over 2 years to calculate what to pay you and start paying you. Of course they pay back that time, but it still is an issue. For that period you are getting only the minimum amount. But the guy had already about 44 years FO experience and a bit row ahead of him as an engineer, and a well-paid one, which also meant a great retirement amount. So the onwares allowed for people to gather up their weeks at the end of it and take 20 to 30 weeks off while submitting their retirement paperwork, so the money being paid would last them longer when they didn't need to spend to go to work. Of course some didn't use it, but many did. So the company gets sold, because the owners saw some writing on the wall that their profiting wouldn't last more than 6 to 7 years more and they wanted out due to old age as well. New ownership, part of some Coca-Cola subsidiary takes over and start removing previous rules. At the guy's position there were 3 of them. Him, a second colleague and a third one. They push out the second, fire him, and the third one has a heart attack literally a week later. Rib. They also go and dock his pay by 15% because he is making too much for a simple engineer. The 3 of them hold the patent for the machinery used on something specific, a second one on how to make that machinery and a third one on the process of the production of a small but significant part. Old owner had allowed them to put the patents on them when they invented a new 30% cheaper and 75% faster way of production years ago. So suddenly he is alone on that position at 64 and the company hires 6 people for him to train on that position. At the same time they give up to the end of the year for all the piled up vacation time to be claimed. Notice the wording, claimed not used. So the guy was using between 1 and 5 weeks for the past decade. So he had gathered 87 weeks of time off, including the current year, but they hadn't looked at specific cases apparently. So they get him the 6 new people to train and they tell him that he need to have them trained in 6 months. He still has 2.3 to 2.5 years till retirement. So he just goes and takes 87 weeks of vacation time on once with a 3 hours notice, on a Friday evening for the next Monday. They don't pay attention on it until the next Thursday when the CEO notices the 6 people sitting around all day and nobody training them. The phone calls start. Then emails. Then letters get added. Then home visits by low-ranking secretaries and such to deliver the letters. Then management visiting his home. By week 7 the CEO has visited 3 times but the door hasn't been opened once. His mother-in-law lives literally across the street, old woman, and him and his wife are taking care of her, so most of the time they are over there and can see everybody visiting their house XD. The production is actually running on itself, but no upkeep is done on that critical part of it. Week 11 he says that line 1 out of the 2 breaks down. They start visiting his house 3 to 4 times a day. 2 weeks later second line breaks down. He obviously has a lot of friends inside and getting constant updates. At that point they have only 4 weeks of backstock. It is December, right before Christ Mass and he goes in during week 13. He says he needs to take some things from his locker room, lol, and the CEO starts yelling at him. You are stopping your time off right now. You are coming back to work to fix everything up. So he offers to come back for 3 days under the agreement that HTE entire week will be returned to him to use for time off. The CEO reluctantly agrees and tries to push him for the training. No budging, only fix things up. By Saturday everything is fixed up and even allows a couple of basic instructions on what needs greasing every week. And he is off again. Few weeks pass, New Year has come around and a line is broken again. He gets called back, and CEO pretends like the previous deal will be used again. He goes in for 2 days, fixes everything, explains couple more things to the team of 6, who by now have attained duties not to be sitting around all day, and when he is about to leave the CEO says tomorrow at 8 am. The guy says what? And the CEO explains you could claim your time off by the end of last year. You just ended your claimed time off so you are losing the remaining 69 weeks. The guy is furious and he just goes straight and reports the company to workers' rights. They are actually dumbfounded by the time off he has and the lady serving him calls her colleagues to listen in. They laugh their asses off by his story. And they actually issue a verdict the next day. It usually takes weeks, but apparently they had too much fun with this one. He is to get all of his time off, under the previous rule, for the time accrued up before the rules changed. So he has his 69 weeks, should be 70 due to him getting the one he worked on renewed by their deal, but he lost that one, and he also has the 6 weeks from the new year. So he goes in with the verdict and gives it personally to a fuming CEO. According to the guy, steam was coming out of his ears. The CEO accepts the deal with the guy coming in for 3 days every 5 weeks off. If he is needed during his time off, tough luck. They should work to produce backstock. A full year goes by Tot Wei and the guys is 66. At this point he has been training the 6 slowly every 5 weeks lol, and he is on his last visit before he takes the last 5 weeks. The CEO goes and delivers personally the firing notice for the first day he will be back. Paul is shocked and leaves for another 5 weeks. This one is a problem, because if apply for retirement even with half a year early/less you are losing significantly more than just that small period, and he has about 10 months ahead of him for retirement. His last 5 weeks expire and he goes in to gather his stuff. Only a coffee cup was remaining. He knew this was coming and he had taken everything over time. He gets an extremely big payout for the firing with no cause. Next day he sends a cease and desist letter to the company for the use of the 3 patents. He talked with the fired guy who had agreed with this revenge plan. He had also talked with the widow of the now dead friend and colleague as well and had both of them on board. He had been supporting actually the widow, but he didn't say anything. I found out very recently from the other guy about it. So now the company has to stop using those machines and the method with 0 notice. All the competitors have found and built and patented their own version of the same, and if they don't find a solution it is going to cost 40% more and take out double time to produce the same part of the procedure of production. So they would need to double the lines if they go and use the old method until they look for a new way. After just 3 weeks of looking to license the method of one of the competitors and not getting anywhere and stock being extremely low, he struck a deal with the guy. He will be an external contractor, who obviously keeps the pants to his name. He will do the maintenance on his own, will be paid by the hour what he was previously making on a day, and he will be on call for maintenance while having one person there at all time for upkeep. He went and stole all 6 the people he trained and hired them in his new company and put them to work back at that factory again, with almost double the pay. He fully trained very quickly and he was now getting paid a shit ton. That CEO was fired for almost stopping production. The deal was struck mere hours before backstock ended, and he also cost the company a ton of money by firing that guy. At the funeral of the old owner many of the old employees met up and told their different stories, and apparently there were 3 more similar cases with the patent play, because the old owner treated his team extremely well. But he apparently was the only one to string them on for almost 2 years by being out on vacation time and getting paid, and all of them had a great laugh, including the widow of the owner and his sister, who were the other 2 partners in the factory before it got sold.